I can still be just as good and moral of a person being a humanist than believing this crap and being hindered. I was tired of believing in hell. I was tired of feeling not good enough. I was tired of being beat down every day that I'm this horrible, wretched sinner.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. We share the inspirational stories of deconversion told by former Christians who are now atheist or agnostic. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
Welcome back for episode 68. Before I jump into the introduction for today's guest, I have several messages and announcements to make, some things that I meant to mention in previous episodes, but just got delayed. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is the Feminist Humanist Alliance. They are looking for new board members. So Krista Cox, who was on this podcast, can't remember the episode number off the top of my head, but she was interviewed on this podcast. She is a board member for the Feminist Humanist Alliance. If you are interested in being a board member, what she mentioned to me was that they have some great goals for the rest of the year and the next year, but they need more active, engaged people who would be able to help implement them. So if you're interested in that, if that sounds like something that you'd like to help with, you can either go to feministhumanist.org and you can reach out to them through their website, or just Google Feminist Humanist Alliance. And if all else fails, you can send me an email and I will connect you with Krista. The next message is from another former guest, Janice Selby. She has mentioned that she wanted to offer a coupon code for listeners of this podcast. So if you want a discount on the conference on religious trauma, you can learn more about it, first of all, at cort2020.com. And you can get $60 off each ticket. That coupon code is VOD036. It's like VOD, like Voices of Deconversion. So VOD036. And just go ahead and enter that in when you're purchasing tickets. There's an option that will show up for entering a coupon code. And then that's where you'll enter it. And then you'll see the discount on checkout. Okay, and then the next two messages I was going to save for at the end of the episode because they're local or based in kind of the Western Washington area. But I'm just going to mention them here. So I have a buddy named Mike. He started a Puyallup Atheists / Puyallup Critical Thinking group this is like Pierce County area of Washington State. If you live in the area or nearby and you're interested in just getting together, he gets together about every other week. And he tries some different venues and stuff, but we just pretty much hang out and chat and stuff. But I want to mention for anyone who is in the area who's thinking about checking it out, to come hang out. So if you are interested in that, email me, steve@vodpodcast.com, and I will connect you with the information you need to know about that group and when it meets. It's also on Meetup. So if you have the app or you can go to meetup.com, you can learn more about the group and see kind of what's going on and what's new with that. But I wanted to put a plug in for my buddy Mike for his group. The other thing, many of you know Dave Warnock, who was also on this podcast a couple episodes ago. He and Marie Delafont from the Everyone's Agnostic podcast are coming to Seattle this next weekend. That's October 19th and 20th, I believe. So if you're in the Seattle area or the Western Washington area and you are interested and you haven't heard already that Dave is coming to Seattle, maybe check out the Everyone's Agnostic Facebook page, or reach out to Marie Delafont, or you can just email me again, steve@vodpodcast.com, and I'd be happy to connect you with the people who have the info on those events. I think they're doing a meet and greet on Saturday, if that's still the plan. I believe it is. And then on Sunday, he's speaking at a secular group at the University of Washington. So those are some of the events and things going on around my neck of the woods. And then one last kind of comments message that I wanted to mention is right before I jumped on here to do the intro for this episode, I read that Cass Midgley and the Everyone's Agnostic podcast, which was very influential in my life and very meaningful to me in years past, that they are going to just have a couple more episodes, and then he's going to discontinue the podcast. They're going to keep the episodes up at this time. It sounds like they're going to keep, so you can still listen to the back catalog of all the episodes, but Cass is moving on to the next chapter in his life. And so they're not going to do any new episodes for Everyone's Agnostic. And I just heard the news right before I jumped on here, and it actually made me so sad to hear. But of course, as on a human level, I'm so happy for Cass that he's moving forward with, whatever this next chapter is for him that feels like the right move. And so I already mentioned it to him via Facebook, but I'm so grateful to him and Bob and Marie and everyone who's been involved with the Everyone's Agnostic podcast over the last few years. And I just wanted to say on my podcast, thank you, Cass. If you ever hear this, I just wanted to express my gratitude because he inspired me a lot. And I am so incredibly appreciative for being able to be on his show, for him coming on my show, and just for all the inspirational guests that he had over the years that really did encourage me in my day-to-day life when I was having difficult times. And it was the first podcast I ever found that dealt with deconversion at all. So I was so happy when I found it, and it has helped me so much. And I don't really know how to say this without sounding super cheesy, but in kind of a beautiful way, something that is really neat to me is in this particular episode, my guest today talks about how this podcast has really been encouraging to him. And I just think, how neat is it that, Cass starts his podcast. It's an encouragement to me. I start a podcast. It encourages someone else. And just the community of ex-Christians, all these different podcasts that are out there now. It's a beautiful thing, and it's really special to me to just think about the impact that we're all having on each other and in helping one another in so many different ways, not just through making podcasts or telling our stories on podcasts, but people connecting via social media, people meeting in person and getting to know each other and being able to gain strength from the communities that we have built and are still building. So just a shout out to Everyone's Agnostic. Just an awesome podcast. I am going to miss it a ton, but I'm so happy for Cass, for him moving forward into this next chapter in his life. And what's kind of neat and kind of exciting, and I'm looking forward to, is Marie is starting her own podcast. It's still being developed, but when it comes out, I will be sure to mention it here. So stay tuned for that. And thank you for listening to these messages and these announcements. Let's go ahead and introduce today's guest. Today's guest was born in Wichita, Kansas, and lived there until about the age of 6 or 7. He was raised in the Assemblies of God type churches, Charismatic churches, and full-on believed by age 5. He had great parents who raised him in the church. He didn't have very many issues with the church, except for he had a very great fear of hell, even as a Christian. He was in and out of the church most of his life until his divorce. He then went to Bible college at a very charismatic school in 2009 and began seeing cracks and flaws in the particular doctrines that he'd been taught. He got his minister's license and upon graduation went straight to the mission field. He went to Asia in 2011 and 12 and worked with the underground church in China and the Burmese refugees in Thailand. He began to have more and more questions. He wondered why good people would go to hell and hated the way that Christians viewed and spoke about the LGBTQ community. Later, he had a stint in rehab for alcohol and began reading books like The Wisdom of Insecurity from Alan Watts. He read Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason and many other books. Eventually, he settles into atheism. The full shift happened less than a year ago. He says he feels truly born again and free. I really appreciated his honesty and was very inspired by his story. It really was wonderful to get to meet him and talk to him and hear his story. It was very inspirational to me, and I appreciated just connecting with him and being able to joke around a few times during the interview, and I just really enjoyed my time talking to him. So without any further delay, here's my interview with Matt Scott. Okay, well, I'd like to welcome Matt Scott to the podcast. Matt, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, sir. I'm looking forward to this very much.
Yeah. So you said you are an atheist now, and you've only been an atheist for a matter of months. Is that right?
Yeah. Where I'm sitting right now, it's probably between 7 and 8 months.
Wow. And so if someone, I guess if someone were to ask you why atheist, why not agnostic or something else, what would you say? Because a lot of people have issues with that term, you know.
I would say honestly, okay, so when it first started happening for me, I had no idea what was happening, honestly. I had been an evangelical Christian, I usually say for about 35 years, because
Yeah.
it was about an 8-year process when I started slowly deconverting before I knew. So the day essentially that I actually could admit to myself, even, or anyone else, that I was an atheist, funny enough, I had gone through a series of events, and I got to the point where I kind of fell at the deist level,
Okay.
where I wasn't officially ready to give up that there was
Something.
a divine creator of some type of there, whatever that looks like, but I could no longer accept that it was anything like what is produced in the quote revealed texts all around the world for all
Yeah.
different types of religions. I could no longer accept any of that. That became mythology to me. Um, and so, ironically enough, I read everything on deism I could find, including Thomas Paine's work,
Oh,
uh,
cool.
his main book, and I forget what the name of the book is right now. Oh, it's The Age of Reason. Yes.
Okay. I've wanted to read his works for a while.
Oh man, his stuff's really good, and honestly, that was the beginning of how I ended up here.
Moving out of deism.
Yeah, and so I went to deism. I went to the website. I went to every book online. Many of them were free on Project Gutenberg because they were 100 plus years old, because our
Yeah.
founding fathers were primarily deists, etc. And so anyway, I read everything I could find, and then I was basically out of deist material, and I'm like, okay, well,
Wow.
I'm not there yet. I'm not wherever I'm supposed to be yet. And so the first quote atheist book I ever read was Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion.
That was one of my very first as well.
And I remember in the very beginning of the book, he says something towards the effect of, at the very end of the introduction, that my hope is that this book will awaken you and open your eyes, and that by the end of it, you will also be, on the path of atheism as well. And ironically enough, by the time I finished that first book, I was pretty convinced that I was moving from deism to atheism. And
Yeah.
henceforth, I read every book I get my hands on. So, I mean, we can talk about whoever, because I've probably read it already.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. Yeah. I remember that book well, and I've had a lot of people mention it. I think it was really significant for a lot of people coming out of the church, because he's kind of a big
Absolutely.
name. So I think maybe he's easier to find his books. You know.
He is. He's one of
Yeah.
the four horsemen, quote, so to
Right.
speak. And we lost one of those, probably the greatest of them, in
Yeah.
2011. And I'm just curious what he would say today,
Oh
the late
man.
Christopher Hitchens.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. He was sharp, edgy, kind of controversial sometimes, but he was definitely a very sharp mind, and I really liked hearing him talk about stuff or confront Christians. It was really kind of fun to
yes,
watch that kind of thing.
he was my kind of guy. He
Yeah,
was
yeah, that's cool.
he would love you to pieces, but he would also rip you to shreds and make you question everything you believed.
Right,
You
right.
know?
So, where did this? Let's talk about your early years. Where did it all begin as far as Christianity?
Okay. Well, I was born in Wichita, Kansas, 1978. I was there until I was 6, almost 7 years old. And of course, when you are born into a Christian family or a Muslim family or any family that has a type of belief, you're indoctrinated into their belief system. And so that's what happened with me. Um, my mom and dad are still alive today, still in love, still together. That is a rare thing these days, and I cherish my folks. They know where I'm at now. That was a very hard conversation.
Oh
But
yeah,
but we still, we still have the same love and respect we always have.
That's cool.
So I came up essentially non-denominational / Assemblies of God. And I say that because all the times we've moved, it was either an Assemblies church or a non-denom church. And so, I came up under the whole, speaking in tongues, the moving of the Holy Spirit, the gifts. I came up under, being slain in the Spirit, the televangelists, all that, man. That was my life, growing up.
Yeah.
And, I always kind of had this rebel edge, but I also still had this horrific fear of hell and God and, getting it right.
Yeah. That stuff kind of clings to you when you learn about that kind of stuff. You don't want to, you fear hell and things like that.
Absolutely, man. Hell was a major motivator in my life,
Wow.
But they knew that. They knew that ages back, when they added it in.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was points in my life where I felt, quote, the call to ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably baptized a total of 4 times throughout my Christian career.
Wow. And just for probably for people who aren't familiar with why you do that, why would you get baptized multiple times? Because in a lot of faiths, you just get baptized once,
Correct. Yeah. So for me, it was because, let's say the first time I got baptized, that was to signify publicly the remission of sins and repentance. And you go down dirty and you come up clean and washed in the blood of Christ, etc. And you are raised to new life. And basically what happens is in between each of those scenarios, you live an actual, real, genuine human life, and you quote sin, etc. And, then you have to come to this point again in your life where you're like, I'm dirty, I'm unclean, I've sinned, I've done all these horrible things. I need to be rebaptized and rededicated to God, etc.
It's kind of like hitting the reset button.
Exactly. And so basically I hit the reset button 4 times.
Wow.
Throughout my life. And knowing that, honestly, it doesn't take more than once.
What are some things that stick out in your mind as far as your faith or how it influenced you or impacted you?
Let's fast forward. Okay, so I was married at a young age. We were married for 8 years. We divorced because of a lot of different reasons that aren't really relevant to the podcast. But
Sure.
What happened was after that, basically, this was the person I spent basically a third of my life with at the time. So it was very, very hard, very traumatizing. And then I'm like, okay, I'm still a part of a church, etc. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with my life now? And so I talked to my pastor at the time. Again, it was very non-denominational, very free in the spirit, that kind of thing. And I told him, I said, I still feel a call to ministry. I feel like I need to go to school, like a seminary or theological seminary or something. So I talked to him, and he's like, I'm going to look up a couple for you. I'm going to pray about it, and I'm going to get with you later, and then we're going to talk about it. And so that's what he did. And so basically, he came back with, I want you to go to Christ for the Nations Institute, because I was also going to be working for him later, etc. So Christ for the Nations Institute, or CFNI, is probably one of the leading, like, super uber charismatic, NAR influenced, NAR meaning New Apostolic Reformation. These are the 7 pillars people that believe they have to be located in all aspects of government and public, etc., to influence the gospel.
Wow.
So they're very, like, propagandic almost. The New Apostolic Reformation, there's a lot of big names associated with them, and I mingled with them shoulder to shoulder, and it was honestly one of the most major wake-up calls to me.
Okay.
And so
So your pastor kind of picked this place, and you just felt like you could trust him with with that type of judgment. You just felt good enough about the relationship with him that
absolutely
you just took his advice. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there was other recommendations from him that I took him up on that have dramatically changed my entire life.
Okay, and how old were you then?
Let's see. It was 2008,
Okay.
almost 2009. It's 2019 now, so I was probably just barely broaching 30 because I just
Yeah.
turned 40 last year.
Yeah, I turned 40 in a few weeks. I'm crossing over.
That's a rough one, man. It's a rough one.
All right, so it's 2008 and you're where did you say this place was located? You're off to this Bible Institute or this Christ for
Yeah,
the
it's
Nations?
it's in it's in Dallas, Texas,
Okay, so that
and
was close to where you were at the time?
about 30 minutes away.
Okay. All right, that's pretty close. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
So it was, yeah, Christ for the Nations Institute, man. Let me tell you, the people who endorsed that place and the people who used to show up for lectures, etc., were some of the the best of the best. You know what I mean? We had so the woman who founded the place, her name was Frida Lindsay, and she goes back to oh gosh, I forget his name. You know, it was the dad Lindsay, but these people were huge, like in the revival eras back in the early 1900s and stuff. So
Okay.
this was just to a Calvinist or a Catholic, these would be the absolute uttermost heretics of the faith. So that's where I went to school. Honestly, I started seeing. So we would have a lecture once a week, and each lecture, not once a week, it would be 5 days a week, but the lecture would be one individual brought in from somewhere else that would speak for the whole week on
Oh.
whatever their thing is or their ministry is.
And they
And
would speak
so,
like for an hour a day.
yes, every day, and this is one of our required classes. And so we were indoctrinated by all kinds of stuff. And so I just remember these people coming in and starting to speak about their ministry and starting to speak about their beliefs, etc. And I used to sit down real close up front, but as the years went by, I kind of started moving more and more towards the back, up into the upper level and farther back to the point where I just couldn't even stomach the sermons anymore because I was like,
Wow.
this is insane, and none of this is in my Bible.
So what kind of stuff were they talking about that was starting to rub you the wrong way?
They would be talking about the NAR, the New Apostolic Reformation, being in these 7 different points of government and civil life, and where they had to be there because God couldn't act or God couldn't move unless they were in positions of power, etc. We started hearing about, miracles and all these people around the world that were, doing these miraculous things, or prophets, when prophets hadn't spoken since the 400 years in the Old Testament, all this kind of crazy stuff, man.
Wow.
Flopping around on the floor like a fish, being slain in the spirit, etc. Just
Yeah.
all of it, like pushing the gifts and pushing this, pushing that. I mean, it was very cult-like. It was crazy. Like all the people with disabilities and with issues would go up front to be prayed for healing. I mean, it was very John G. Lake and very, Benny Hinn. But we all know those guys were just absolute frauds and charlatans.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow, so it was starting to take on that kind of feel, kind of culty, kind
Oh,
of like more political and kind of out there than it was biblical and getting a firm
absolutely.
basis in your faith.
Absolutely. It was as
Wow.
far from theology and doctrine as you could get, and it was 100% experience of the individual preaching for that week. It was awful. It was
Yeah.
awful.
So did you decide to stick it out there?
I did. I stuck it out, and I got my degree there,
Okay.
and I went to DBU for a while after that, Dallas Baptist University, which actually was a seminary and I went there, and that's where I actually started getting a real education.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
um, but the funny thing is, through the process, 2 to 3 of my best friends were going to this school, but were diehard Calvinists.
Okay.
So theologically speaking, I was on the Arminian side, Jacobus Arminius, He was a major proponent of free will, and that you can fall from grace, and that you can lose your salvation, etc. And then the Calvinist side was, John Calvin. I mean, the Reformation on, like Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Wesley, John Knox, all these hardcore Orthodox believers that have written many volumes of books and commentaries, etc.
Yeah.
And so these guys really influenced me towards Calvinism, because what I was seeing and hearing was as far from biblical truth as I could imagine. And so they started influencing me towards Calvinism. And so I transitioned from an Arminian to a Calvinist. Now, at this point, I'm upset and I'm pissed off at everything I hear, because it's all heresy. You know what I mean?
So
I'm
you
like,
kind of converted over to the Calvinist side when you went to this Dallas Baptist University?
yeah, well, actually, it started before that. But, DBU would have been more Calvinist than the rest. But all of the stuff that I had in my head and my spirit from CF&I prior had really pushed me towards the Calvinist side.
Okay.
So it just got bad. It got real bad. And there's a thing called cage stage Calvinists, which is like when you first convert, all you can really do is just like shoot down everyone that is preaching a quote false gospel, or anything contrary to scripture. If they're using experiential fluff, or if it's Benny Hinn or TBN or Daystar, or any of these guys just putting out there these real seeker sensitive type people.
Yeah.
It was just absolutely shot down, and we'd go on rants for hours and days.
Interesting. So it was very, gosh, I can't even think of the word, but it got you really like fired up for that particular belief system. And it's very evangelical Christian in that sense. Like,
yes,
our way's right, and we're going to tell the world.
Exactly, and it was very divisive. And here's one of the things that started really weighing on me. I can't remember where it was in the scriptures, but it was the passage that was talking about not causing divisions, in the church, or not causing divisions amongst the brothers and sisters, etc. And then another one where it says that God is not the author of confusion, but the Prince of Peace, etc., etc. And so at this point, I'm sitting here like, well, there's 33,000 different denominations, and how many different translations? And then if you read back to the original Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, or the original papers that were, rescribed 150 times from the originals that we don't have anymore,
right?
Who knows what the truth really is? So you're not the author of confusion, yet I stand here before you in a seminary more confused than I ever was on knowing where the real Jesus is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I was just, my mind was turning to mush, because I was learning so much on both sides. That really started to awaken me that, hey, you know what? Maybe this is BS to begin with.
Wow. And so that's when you were at Dallas Baptist University. You had become a hardcore Calvinist, but then as all this kind of kept going on, you started to think like, it's causing so much division, and the Calvinist side, they're so sure that they're right, and then probably the other side's the same way. There's, and that was what was bothering you, was seeing like how can one group or sect or denomination have the corner on all the truth, and why is there so much confusion if there's one God, and how could there be all this difference and all this variation?
Correct. Yeah, when we're all supposedly under the same umbrella, why is there so much absolute confusion, and why is there so much just division? Like, why?
Did you start to question your Calvinism in particular, or were you still pretty sure of what you believed at that point?
I was almost, I was pretty much 100% sure. But the problem is that I had believed one way for 30 something years at that one time, and then basically all of those ways that I believed, I saw the cracks and the flaws, and I was like, no, wait a minute, that's not right. And so I completely switched to a whole different doctrine. And so that was really the first jump towards atheism.
Okay.
And then from there, it it metamorphosed, slowly, very slowly, over the next few years until I got to 8 months ago.
That's kind of interesting because it's like I think this happened with me in a different way, but you find out a new truth or a different way of seeing Christianity or being Christian. And I think at first we get excited, like, oh wow, I found the, maybe a better theology or a more correct understanding of how to be Christian. And at first we get excited about it and we're enthusiastic about it. And then it's almost, and for your faith, you're worse off now, because now you look back at something that was foundational for your whole life that you've walked away from. And then you start kind of questioning the thing that you just came to. And that seems like kind of where you were at, like, okay, well, how could that thing I believe for all those years be wrong? And now I've just found this one truth, and then you're kind of recognizing all these other differences within, Christians and stuff at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What happened for you at that point? Like, did you stay at that school as well, or was it getting to be too much?
Well, the last thing I did at CF&I before I went to DBU, I went on a semi-long-term mission trip with one of the groups there. And we went to China, Thailand, and Burma. And it was amazing. It was very eye-opening for a lot of reasons. But it was also kind of sad because we had a lot of groups of people that were still believing for like healings and miracles and all that kind of stuff. And we're in these refugee camps, like 2 miles from the border of Burma, where it's still nothing but civil war. And we're over here bringing them, food. We're bringing them supplies. We're bringing them the scriptures in their language, etc. And yet praying for miracles, for some of the blind men to be unblinded. And we're praying for amputees who had their arms blown off and legs blown off, stepping across mines to escape Burma to Thailand, praying for them to grow their legs and arms back. And you know what I saw that whole time? Nothing. Not one miracle.
Yeah.
Not one. But what I did see was awesome. What the part that I kept with me was the humanistic part. That we're not all pieces of shit, and that we all do care. And my thing has always been wanting to help people any way that I can. And I've always been a bit of an intellectual. I've always been a major reader. I probably read 100 to 150 books a year.
Wow.
And I mean, I can't get enough. But for me, it all amounts to nothing if I don't go out and do something with it. And for me now, this has kind of changed and metamorphosed into wanting to be a voice of the deconverted, because, man, when I was looking, there was nobody for me or nothing for me until I started doing the research. I had no idea what I was going through. Wow. I had no idea what I was experiencing to the church and all the people around me. I was an apostate. I was a heretic.
Yeah.
I was going to hell. I was going to burn. But, man, you can't help what you believe or believe in. You either believe in it or you don't. And is that really enough to send you to an eternity in hell forever? Think about a cost-benefit analysis. If you have a thing like hell and you have this supposed loving God and an omniscient God, etc., and your worst crime is that for 80 years you just didn't believe in it, or even for 15 or 20 years, you just couldn't believe it. Does that really warrant you spending an eternity in the worst place you could imagine?
Right. The punishment doesn't fit the crime.
Absolutely.
If it's even a crime at all.
Yeah. I mean, how, you know what I mean? Obviously, your side didn't work because you didn't have enough evidence. Because, if the evidence was there, he would have shown it one way or another.
So was this a turning point for you, being at on that mission trip? I mean, it sounds like it was, but
it was in a lot of ways. When I came back from that, I married my second wife, and we had our daughter. and she was not
And your
expecting.
second wife is still a Christian, or
Oh yes,
okay,
so is my current wife.
okay,
So again, I had more than 2 or 3 marriages by the age of 40 because of my spiritual convictions, and I wish I knew then what I knew now. You know,
yeah,
because it's dramatically altered my life.
yeah,
But so yeah, after the mission, I came back. She and I married. My daughter was born 8 or 9 months later.
mm-hmm.
And she and I weren't on good terms for quite a while. We divorced. I kind of fell back into a darker, deeper spiral, and
Mm-hmm.
did some different things.
And how long ago was that?
2011,
Okay,
2011, 2012.
okay,
It was a couple months after, and then moved on, and then a couple years later, I'm married again. That goes south. A couple years later, I'm married again. That goes south. A couple years later, I'm married again. Now I'm with my current wife, and doing everything I can, and we have a really great thing. She's an amazing woman, and we just um, have a whole different perspective now, and a whole different tool chest, if you
yeah.
will.
So you came back from the mission trip. What happened that kind of turned you? Because you weren't an atheist when you came back from Burma.
No.
So what kind of pushed you further down that path? I guess from about 2012 until just a few months ago.
So I continued down the road of eternal questions, if you will, questioning my own theology, questioning
Mm-hmm.
where I came from. 2017, I had been, traveling for a living for a few years prior. I had become pretty addicted to whiskey, and it got to the point where it damn near killed me.
Oh wow.
And so one night, before I almost did a very horrible thing, um, by the grace of the universe, if you will,
Yeah.
I blacked out. And I woke up the next morning on my bed uh, with a weapon right next to me that I planned on using the night before from
Wow.
depression. And I said, okay, it's time. And so I went to rehab. And when I went to rehab, there was an AA group, night and day. Most of my teachers and professors there and therapists were very Eastern or Universalist. And so when I started to see the dynamic within the group of just AA alone, there's a Jewish man who's gay. There's 2 or 3 gay women. There's a Muslim. There's multiple atheists. There's,
And
people of
in Texas,
all
no less.
in Texas. Yeah. And we were from all over the place, right? But we
Yeah.
were all there for one reason, man. And when I started to see the interaction and the love between all of us, and just the connection, the human connection that went deeper than all that superficial belief stuff. It was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, dude, how could any omniscient being send any one of these people to that horrible place simply because they're how they are?
Right, they're misguided. They found in the Christian view they're misguided, or they found the wrong God,
Yeah.
or they just never learned of it. And it just, once you meet people who are those people that are theoretical in your mind, when you actually meet them
Yeah.
in real life, how can you think that a God would just harm that person for eternity and torture them?
Yes. The crime does not fit the punishment. And it's like, look, man, if you really are the God that created all of this, then and omniscient, you already know all this. And if these people were going to suffer to spend eternity in a hell for the way that you created them,
Right.
then why did you even create them to begin with? Because that is not loving. That is not omniscient. That is pseudomaniacal. That
Yeah.
is tyrannical. That is it's the most awful thing I could imagine.
Yeah,
You
it's
know
creating people just to destroy them. I mean, that's about as evil as it
why?
gets.
It's as evil as it gets. You're absolutely right. And so the hell thing has always been a major source of anxiety for me.
Did you still have trouble getting over that, even though you started to become a non-believer? Did you still kind of struggle with the idea of hell?
I did. I
Yeah.
absolutely did. And honestly, once in a blue moon, I still do.
Yeah.
Just because of the lack of solid knowledge beyond this life.
Yeah. It bothered me for, I'd say, probably a few years. Like, it kind of stuck with me. You know, from time to time, I'd have those thoughts. And same with, like, praying. Like, I was so used to praying, depending on prayer to get through difficult times. And you just learn different coping mechanisms. But it's not easy at all.
No, it's not, because, like, prayer, I mean, that's something I would just do almost involuntarily.
Yeah.
You know, at times. Like, every night, you know, before I get on an airplane, before I go on the road, before anything, you know.
Instinctively.
And like, I literally had to tell myself the last few months not to pray. I'd be like, I would have inner monologue. I'd be like, no, dude, you don't do this anymore. And you will not do this. You know.
Did you feel like, was prayer a comfort to you? And two, did you feel like you were keeping yourself from being comforted by not allowing yourself to pray?
A little bit of both. I think part of it for me was that it was the sheer shock and reality of, dude, there is really no one out there listening to my innermost needs and desires.
Yeah.
There is literally no one guiding my path. This is all me. And that's some scary shit, because, man, I don't always get it right. You know?
Yeah.
You know? But
yeah.
On the same note, it was also very liberating, because, like Christopher Hitchens said, you know, there's no longer this, like, celestial North Korean dictator up there listening to every single one of your thoughts and, you know, marking off on the chalkboard up there whenever you do something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you can actually live your life and be your own. And that's one of the things I used to say all the time when I was starting to get frustrated but didn't really understand where I was at, is that just once I would like to wake up one day not feeling like I was broken, not feeling like I needed something, not feeling like I lacked something, not feeling inferior, or like there is nothing that I can do to better my situation without this super powerful being that I cannot see, talk to, taste, smell, interact with, etc.
Yeah.
That really started to piss me off, you know, a lot. And it's because I was tired of feeling that way. I'm like, there is nothing I do that horrible in this life that a being who created everything, not just the earth, could not overlook or forget. Or even, you know, forget forgiveness. The whole idea of original sin to begin with really started to boil my blood. I'm like, you're the one who did it. You're the one who put the tree in the garden. You're the one who created us like this. You're the one who decided to make it this way when you're supposedly perfect and omniscient, etc. You could have done it a whole nother way.
Yeah.
Where we don't have to suffer for millennia because of your choice. How is that our fault?
It's like the game is rigged. You know, he set it up the way he wants it, and then he knows we're going to fail. I mean, in a way, it's like that. Reminds me of the Hunger Games, you know? Yes. Everyone's going to die.
Yes.
Few of you might make it out, but most of you are going to die and go to hell. And I've made it this way, and that's just the way it is.
And it wasn't even just that. It's as I go through my studies, it's like, you hear about those one scriptures where the Pharisees come before God, you know, in heaven, and they're like, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not raise the dead, heal the sick, etc.? And Jesus looks at them and says, woe to you, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. When these people believed genuinely that they were saved, it's like, you don't know from 1 minute to the next if just because you have a bad thought, if you're not an apostate too.
Yeah. Yeah,
and you do everything you can.
Yeah.
And you fight your flesh, and you're constantly nonstop making war against this body and this mind that are acting exactly as they were formed to be.
Yeah.
And how was that our fault? How is that our fault? You know,
It's interesting because, like, well, one, I've never heard anyone defend the Pharisees, so that's kind of cool. As an atheist, you can, take from the Bible whatever you want to, and
yeah.
I think no, but it's a good point.
They were just humans too,
right?
You know?
Well, and it kind of makes me think about, like, we come from a real conservative, like Assemblies of God type, charismatic type faith, where I think often, having a real relationship with God, all that is really emphasized, versus some of the more formal, like some Catholics and definitely like Episcopalians, Methodists, they have a lot of them have a more like, more, I guess you could say it's more like the Pharisees, where they have certain traditions and certain things they do, and they don't emphasize the relationship piece as much. And either way, you can be screwed. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And here the Pharisees, like maybe some of these modern day, Christians, are doing what they think is right. It's their tradition. They were raised that way. They think they're living out their faith the way they're supposed to, only to find out when they go to heaven, oh, guess what? It wasn't about all of the rules and following all of the laws. And they they didn't know any different. It seems unfair, Like,
it does.
How is that fair at all,
And not even that, take the Hindus. I've traveled all over Asia. I've spent a lot of time with Hindus, with Buddhists. These are some of the most beautiful, amazing people I've ever known in my life. And all they're doing is reading their gospels. They're reading their beliefs. And then you have it. Okay, so according to someone, depending, regardless of what religion it is, you and I, as former believers, we were going to hell in some other religion. So, right. I mean, we're all going to hell in somebody's religion.
In every religion other than our own, and in some cases, in every other Christianity than our version of Christianity.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like, so you know what? I'm taking a risk either way, man. So, you know what? Finally, you just get to the point where, like, I want to live my dang life.
It just becomes ridiculous and silly to think that one version or one denomination has it all, and it's constantly splitting right. Still, right? It's still splitting. Yeah.
Like, take the Baptist denomination alone. How many variants of Baptist churches are there? I mean, who knows, man? And it's just like, I don't know. It's just this, when you finally, like, I like to call it, waking up. I think there's a term out there for it called, becoming woke or being woke. It's, for me, it's literally Morpheus just unplugged me from the dadgum matrix. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm seeing reality for the first time. Yeah. And when you start to have those moments, sure, you have those accompanying scriptures that want to torture you, like, oh, in the last days, the love of many will grow cold, or, in the last days, if possible, even the elect will be deceived, etc. You know what I mean? There's a scripture for everything.
Yeah.
And you have those floating through your mind, but you cannot deny what you see when you see it.
Right.
And not everyone's ready for that. Like, I probably would be the most prolific devangelist that I could think of, because it's almost like when you become an atheist for the first time from a believer, it's almost like you get into that cage stage Calvinism as well.
Yes,
where you want to shout it from the rooftops, and you want to be like, dude, wake up. You're being brainwashed. You are in the matrix. You know what I mean? It's like, here, read this and read that and check this out. But it's the stigma of the word atheist. They're like, they don't want to look at it. It's like, but it's almost like if you came at them with the word agnostic, right. Like they might actually investigate.
They're more receptive, or because no one knows what that means,
Right.
And if you say, I don't know, then people are like, oh, okay, cool, you're not a threat. But if you say,
right.
I'm an atheist, they think what that means is, I know for a fact that no God is anywhere,
Exactly. And none of us that are thinking people really can even say that, because none of us have been on the other side, so we don't know.
Right.
But we do know that according to what we have read, what we have studied, what history actually shows and proves, what amazing Bible scholars like Bart Ehrman, etc., have exposed is that you may not want to put all your eggs in this basket, because it very likely was not true,
Yeah.
And if it was, it's so much different than any of the texts that we actually have.
Yeah, and it wouldn't, so I'm thinking of how much it impacted you in particular, in your personal life and your mental life. And I think about that when, the thought pops in my mind that, a lot of Christians feel like it's a good religion. It does good for people. Well, not in this case, and not in my case, and not in so many other people's cases, because not only
You're
is
right.
the religion harmful in teaching that, you're bad the way you are, and
Correct.
repressing sexuality, and just there's a lot of bad things about
Yes.
religion anyway.
Yes.
But when
The purity culture,
right.
etc.
But when you buy into it and you come out of it, there's a whole nother, like, depression and confusion and loss of community and the religious trauma syndrome that comes up all the time. And
Absolutely.
it's not okay. It's not good.
It's not.
It causes so much harm. And
It's not good.
yeah.
It's not good at all. It's like, when we were kids, we believed in the Tooth Fairy and we believed in Santa Claus. And by the time we got to age, like, let's say 8 or 10, for the sake of argument, we were like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
We don't believe this.
Right.
We busted you coming out and putting that down there. That wasn't no Santa Claus. That was you, Mom.
Yeah, yeah.
And how is this any different? But yet, we have institutions and organizations around the world tied to this. Do you believe in a unicorn? I don't. I've never seen one. I've never seen a historical document on one, or a documentary or anything, right?
Right.
So why are we going to believe in a talking snake? Or a dude that survived for 3 days in a whale, hundreds of feet below the freaking ocean surface? How are we going to believe in that, oh, God was mad because we built something 300 feet high, which is as tall as the Six Flags Tower, but yet now we have space stations in space, but yet he decided to get pissed enough to strike them down with befuddlement and give us all these different languages, but yet we're floating around space right now.
Right.
Where's God now? Where's he now?
Right.
He
doesn't care about the satellites and us going to, all these far off planets with our, space equipment and stuff. But yeah, but the Tower of Babel, that was just too much.
I mean, come on. You know what I mean? And the flood, science has proven that that's not the way it is. And if you look at the science and the history for the study of evolution and natural selection versus creationism, and that we're only 6,000 to 7,000 years old. I mean, come on, dude. The pyramids are 14,000 to 18,000 years old alone. I mean, you're missing a whole age. And then you have the ancient alien, hypothesis, which is documented. You know what I mean? We could have been seeded by some extraterrestrial race, and we know that we're one little tiny itty bitty galaxy in a cluster of billions and billions and billions of others. We're not the center of the universe, and Galileo proved that and got burned at the stake for it.
Wow.
I mean, science has been hindered over 1,500 years. The progression, the scientific progression of the human race has been hindered over 1,500 years minimum because of religious just psychopaths.
Yeah, authoritarian.
These people who were like, look through this telescope, dude. You can see it for yourself. They're like, nope. You're a heretic. We're burning you at the stake.
Yeah.
I mean, and they could have proved it. They just had to look. They didn't even want to look. And it's like, where could we have been now? Like, where could we have been now in our culture?
Yeah. And then when you think about how religion's still influencing policy in not only America, but in other countries, and how much it's holding us back, and it really does, it hits you sometimes. I mean, just right now, it's kind of hitting me. Like, it has infected everything, and it still is infecting everything.
I mean, you can't even listen when somebody sneezes. What do you normally say?
Yeah.
Bless you. I mean, from the most minute things, and it's not just Christianity. Christianity is one of the youngest. But you look at all these cultures, and thank goodness that atheism and agnosticism and reason and logic are going through the roof right now as far as a Barna study goes. People who are actually questioning their existence. Thank goodness that's going through the roof. but I didn't believe this either, man. I was like conservative, period. Republican, period. I was,
Right.
I loved homosexuals. I had many homosexual friends, but when it came down to a night we were all drinking and getting really serious, I'm like, that one day you're going to have to repent of this, blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't have a stick in my own eye. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Well,
it
because
just
you feel like you're supposed to uphold, the rules, like trying to help other people follow them too. It's
the Great Commission. I mean, you had a mandate and you believed it with your entire core, and I even questioned it when I was younger, but it wasn't until I was presented with enough alternate information that I could actually really embrace it and study enough to be like, you know what? No, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is hurting people.
Yeah. So what was the final straw then? Just about 7 or 8 months ago.
I honestly can't narrow it down to one thing. What I can narrow it down to is that I've basically been a scholar and a theologian my whole life because I've been obsessed with the Bible and spiritual things.
It's
and
fascinating.
And ancient languages and prophecy, etc. And it just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't see any of that happening.
It just
you know what?
Slowly kind of faded and whittled away.
Yeah, you got all these people who like supposedly speak into your life these prophetic words, etc. And they're praying for this miracle and that miracle, and they're not happening. And then you switch your theology completely or your doctrine. And now you're a hardcore Calvinist, and you no longer believe in miracles. You're a cessationist. Now you believe that none of the gifts of the Spirit have been in operation since the apostolic days. So you stop believing in this, that, and the other. It was just this long progression. And finally, you get back out in the real world, and you end up in real world scenarios. Divorces.
Yeah.
You want to drink again, bad.
Life is messy.
You want to do something to numb the pain, etc. And you get back on this spiral, and you kind of start to question everything. And I tried hard for the last few years to just stay in church, go to church, listen to the messages. But I honestly can say that the last couple of years, man, the more and more I sat there, I didn't feel anything, and I was just like, you know what, this is absolute bullshit. This is no different than any other religion, and why am I here wasting my time? I can still be just as good and moral of a person being a humanist than believing this crap and being hindered. I was tired of believing in hell. I was tired of feeling not good enough. I was tired of being beat down every day that I'm this horrible, wretched sinner.
So that's interesting, because you talked about kind of feeling judged a little earlier. You talked about that. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be a pretty strong theme for you, like feeling like you weren't good enough in God's eyes. And so you seem to have a bit of a burden lifted off of you. Like it sounds like it was a weight that lifted off of you when you could just let that go.
A major weight. Major weight. I always used to tell myself, if I could prove that hell never existed, I wouldn't believe in any of this shit.
Wow. Because it was the threat of punishment that was kind of holding it over you, which is so frustrating. Yeah.
For just being what I am.
Right.
Human. You fight sin, you fight struggles, you fight this, that, and the other. And one day you realize, you know what? This is just a part of who I am, and I'm just going to do the best I can.
I feel like Christianity made it worse, especially in your particular case, because we're all imperfect, and I think everyone acknowledges that. But Christianity gives it a name. It calls it sin, and someone had to die because of it.
Makes everything harder. And I have a 7-year-old daughter. Okay, and her mom is her primary. She's the primary caretaker, because I used to travel for a living. So it just, I was the weekend daddy, etc. But I love my daughter to death. I do everything I can do for her. We have a good relationship. But what drives me insane, like when her mother first found out that I was an atheist, she lost it. I mean, and said things to the point like, I can't believe you would even drive around the Metroplex in that car. with our little girl, with you being an atheist, because God forbid, I'm afraid that he strike you down dead with a bolt of lightning. I'm like, are you the most ignorant freaking idiot on the planet? Do you think it really works like that? I said, listen, I will never broach this topic with my 7-year-old daughter. I said, but if the day comes when she's a teenager or almost an adult and she wants to talk to me and ask me, Daddy, why don't we go to church anymore? Why haven't we gone to church for all these years? Then I'm going to have that conversation with her, but not right now. But what I hate is that she takes her to church every Sunday, and it's still a non-denominational church. And I know my baby girl is still being indoctrinated with the fires of hell and all this other horrible shit that I'm going to have to help undo one day with her religious trauma.
Yeah.
No child should ever have to worry about the fires of hell. Dude, I had that in my head destroying me since I was 5 years old. Like, what kid should have to deal with that? I mean, that is a huge thing alone and in and of itself. Where you think that every minute you have this dude looking down on everything you do and thinking about every thought you have and potentially is going to send you into this horrific eternal torture. I mean, what is that?
Yeah, it's I've heard Richard Dawkins refer to it as like it's like psychological child abuse, you know.
It absolutely is.
I mean, you're scaring them to death, you know. A lot of kids people I talked to who were, you know, when they were kids, they would be afraid, you know, at night and stuff. They would think about this, and I don't think parents realize the impact it has on kids.
Dude, I've had a fascination and a phobia of hell and demons my whole life. I mean, I'm an artist by trade. You know, when I was a kid, that's one of the things I could do. And if you look at all my drawings as a kid growing up, it was all this dark, horrible, like demonic, hellish crap, because that's what was in my head.
Yeah.
You know, that came from the church. That didn't come from anything else.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of the many things that I think is just absolutely abusive and horrible. Original sin to me is on the same par, because that means that you get to wake up every day immediately feeling inadequate and not good enough in and of yourself.
So I wanted to ask you about who you first told. So when you realized I'm not a Christian anymore, did you talk to anyone about it?
I did. Did
you wait a little while, or did you think about it before you kind of brought it up? Or
I had been talking about it briefly, very, very casually, when I became a deist.
Okay.
And I wasn't just like out there, I'm a deist now or whatever, you know, because I have to understand that the majority of my circles were not theologians or Bible college students either. So, you know, I kind of kept it mellow. But when I got to the point where I could no longer accept all the God speak and all the, you know, Christianese being spoken all the time about everything, I was like, look, I'm going to level with you. You know, here's where I'm at. Here's why. And I hope you can accept that and still see me as your son and not be petrified that I'm going to burn in hell forever and forget that we have a relationship based on carbon-based, you know, items.
So it kind of just came up like casually, like when your parents were mentioning something about Christianity, you just said, "Hey, this is where I'm at."
Yep.
And so how did they respond to that?
My mom, she's one of the sweetest ladies in the world, right? I mean, but she's very mousy and she's very, very nervous Chihuahua type lady, you know, a lot of anxiety. She's been a housewife her whole life, doesn't get out much, you know, so she's a little bit socially awkward. But sweetest lady on the planet. I couldn't ask for a better mom or dad. But she has known my whole life that I have been a seeker of truth. And I've brought certain books home and I've studied certain things and talked about certain things that have always made her very, very nervous and uncomfortable. So when she found out the hard blow, she basically broke down, man, and crumbled to the floor and went into tears.
Wow.
And started talking about those certain scriptures and was terrified for my soul, etc. And my dad was much more understanding because he grew up with his father, who was a master mason. He was World War II hero. He was into the occult. He was into a lot of things other than just Christianity. So he had already opened my dad's mind a lot. And so my dad and I have always had a very, very, very close bond where we could always talk about any of this stuff.
That's cool.
And he would listen. He wouldn't just shut me down. The problem is that he's very influenced by my mom because, they're retired. He's in his early 70s. She's in her late 60s. They're retired. So all they really have to do is spend all this time dwelling on these kind of things, It's really interesting how all that's kind of come about. I mean, like, they haven't shunned me. They haven't, told me constantly I'm going to burn in hell and all that. We still hang out. We're just kind of under this understanding right now that neither one of us really want to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's too painful for them.
Yeah, well, it's been, how many years for me? Been 13 years, I think. About 13, 14 years. And my mom, who was kind of like your mom, like broke down crying when I told her. It was maybe 3 or 4 conversations, and they didn't last more than maybe 30 seconds on the whole thing all this time. So yeah, it is something that, like, for some folks is not easy for them to talk about. And of course now it sort of makes it awkward, but in your situation, at least for me, we're able to just live life and talk about other things. And sometimes she'll say something like, I'm praying for you. I know you don't believe, but I just want to let you know,
right.
So little things will come out like that, but hopefully it kind of goes that direction for you where it sounds like you guys have a good relationship. So it probably will.
Yeah. They'll say that. And like when I have to travel for work or whatever, still, they're like, hey, we just want to let you know we're praying for a safe flight, etc. I'm like, hey, I appreciate the prayers.
Yeah. Because it's, it's like them saying, I wish you well.
Yeah, it's like it's not offensive to me or anything. And the only thing is like when me and my wife will go out to eat with the family and stuff, like let's say I go get up to get a refill of water or something, then my dad will be over there and my wife's here like, we're still praying for him. We believe that he's going to come back around. I've had a prophetic dream that he's going to come back to faith. You just keep the faith. You just keep the faith. And then I'll come back and I'm like, I heard all that, Dad.
Oh no.
So
I don't know, is he like my dad where he talks super loud but he thinks he's whispering?
Yes.
My dad does that like in movie theaters and stuff, and I'm like, Dad, I just try to like end the conversation quickly.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. And he's got hearing aids and everything, but he's still, you know what I mean, man? It's just dad stuff.
But yeah, that kind of thing really irks me, like trying to get into the other family members and be like, okay, you're gonna, like, we're gonna make them help bring him back around, kind of thing. Or
yes,
it's like no, none of that.
Be like, look, you don't understand. Okay, you want to have a conversation about God and about the Bible? Look, I'm going to teach you something. Okay, I'm here for a reason. Damn it,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what drove me crazy. Is like with my dad, he would listen, but he also thought like it's just a phase. He kind of talked to me in that way, and it really kind of offended me. I never told him that, but it offended me because I just felt like I can't. Actually, I went off on my mom in a text a couple years ago. Because she said something about like coming to your beliefs lightly or something, and long story short, I don't want to get derailed here, but my nephew had said something about God and like scientists had found proof of him in the universe, and he had some link to an article, right? And so I said my little piece, which I usually just refrain, but I said my little piece about like which God did they find, Zach?
Right.
Which of the thousands of gods did they happen to find behind Mars, or whatever it was.
Exactly.
And then my mom chimed in with that comment about she was almost saying like I'd come to my conclusions lightly, and I was just like I was at work and I spent like a couple hours writing that text because I was pissed and I couldn't focus on anything else. And so it was just like I went to Bible school, like I read the whole Bible, like, and studied the whole damn thing. Like I gave a lot of my effort. Right. So yeah, I totally associate with like the feeling of I've poured my heart and soul into this, blood, sweat, and tears. And then if
Yes.
someone's like, oh, you'll come around. It's like, no. No,
Right. Exactly.
No, I'm pretty sure that I'm not going back to that at least.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. That would absolutely be going backwards. And, it's, I deal with the same thing, man. And I don't know if we'll ever not deal with that my whole life. But look, I got so serious. Look, I made it official. See?
I was going to mention that. So for people listening, it's a tattoo. It's like is that the scientific, the atom?
It's the atheist symbol, but with the atomic spirals around it. So it kind of represents the atheistic, agnostic, and scientific community.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you got that tattooed on the back of your hand.
On my left hand, yes.
So funny enough, when we were in Hawaii recently, and my 17-year-old wanted to get that exact tattoo. And of course, my mom's there. My mom was getting a tattoo as well. My wife got a tattoo. All these people in my family got a tattoo. I don't know. Everybody was being crazy.
Wow.
I mean, I know you have several tattoos. It's not crazy to have tattoos. I'm just saying. It was kind of cool. I still can't pull the trigger because I can't think of what I want, but someday I might. He ended up. I was kind of afraid of him getting the A, because he's a kid. Like his views could change too. And
sure.
I was kind of like, oh man, I don't know. Well, he ended up kind of decided not to go with the A, but he did the atom symbol, and he got it right on his wrist on the inside, and it looks pretty cool. It's kind of a cool. I was like, right on. So it's kind of his way of he's pro science, and he's, it's sort of his being himself. As a 17-year-old, he's kind of expressing himself.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of funny. You got similar tattoo.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you look right above it, it says, I've basically the whole left arm is a sleeve, and it's kind of the Battle of Armageddon. But I have "Religion Kills" right on top, capping off the wrist.
Wow. When did you get that one?
Honestly, about 3 to 4 months ago, I capped it out with that because they all mark a specific event,
Yeah.
I mean, and I would never do that unless I was 150% solid,
Right.
They're conversational pieces, and it's like, hey, you want to evangelize me? Okay, cool. Now you get to listen to me evangelize you.
Yeah.
Right? In a very loving, humanist, non-pushy way. It's like, I don't have to talk about it, but if you want to talk about it, I'm down.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you came out of faith, for many of us, you lose community. You're on your own. You're kind of alone in your beliefs. What did you do to kind of get through those times, or what was most helpful for you to get through some of those difficult times?
The first thing I did was order every recommended book I could find on atheism and on deconversion. I mean, every story. I ordered Dan Barker's book, Godless. I joined Freedom from Religion Foundation. I got on the Clergy Project. I became a part of the Clergy Project. I got everything I could find from Seth Andrews. I got everything I could find from Daniel Dennett, from Christopher Hitchens, from John Loftus, from Sam Harris, Bart Ehrman. And I mean, I just stuffed myself full of information. And while I was doing that, because I have a commute to work, I was seeking out podcasts. And the two that I found spoke to me the most was yours and Luke King's and Seth Andrews, The Thinking Atheist. And I literally have listened to just about every episode of your podcast, of his, of Seth's. And I'm talking about going back to the beginning, man.
Yeah. Most people, if they come on recently, they'll just listen to the last few, or they'll pick a couple. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
I like to see the progression, and I like to see how things start. And I'm like,
yeah, me too.
These guys went through a similar experience at one point, and it was so intense and passionate for them that they felt like they needed to create, a forum for these kind of experiences, and that's what I need.
Well,
and so I just listened to everything.
And you talked about wanting to be a voice as well, and I just think it's so needed. What's funny is I, in a sense, feel like there are tons of these podcasts, even just deconversion stories, popping out everywhere. There's books coming out all the time.
Yes.
But I'm kind of plugged into it now. You 8 months ago weren't, and you
Right.
still felt kind of alone. And so to me, what that says is we need this idea of people leaving the faith and becoming non-believers to be kind of a mainstream, well-known idea. And that's going to
Yes,
take tons
absolutely.
and tons and tons of us coming out, being vocal, our families finding out, the media catching wind of a story here and there. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of us sharing and being open. So I'm excited about that. And in fact, there were a couple high-profile deconversions. I don't know if they're both atheists now, but Joshua Harris, and then some guy from
and
Hillsong.
the Hillsong guy.
Yeah, that's funny that you've been paying attention to that too. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I pay attention because it's like, look, we're not alone. It's not just us.
Yeah.
You know, it's high profile. It's people
cool.
in this that write the music in your churches. It's these people.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they're playing in your worship band. They're preaching the sermon. They're the lady handing out the bulletins. They're the person doing the offering. It's like, and they're just your regular congregants. There's people like that sprinkled in there who are doubting, who don't even believe anymore and are still there, you know?
Right,
just because
that's
they
don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
That was Dan Barker. That was Luke King. That was so many people. That was Seth Andrews. That was all these people in the beginning. Like, they stayed in ministry until they could figure out what the hell was going on and what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because that's all they knew. That's all they knew. You know, and it's a freaky place to be, man, especially when your whole entire worldview comes crumbling down around you.
You gained a lot of, like, it made you feel better to just read a lot, to be able to kind of soak all this in that way, and then through some podcasts. That was helpful too.
Absolutely.
Were you because this isn't always true, or were you someone that needed community? So was that a piece that you are missing or missed? Or were you kind of good? It was kind of nice just to not have that judgment anymore.
I've always kind of been a loner, like able to be functional and content and at peace in myself. But yeah, I mean, for times of growth, etc., in belief systems, yeah, I definitely needed community and fellowship. But I had honestly been fading out of the church for many years. I mean, I'd be lucky if I'd get to church once every couple of months, you know? And so I was already kind of, you know, the island. And for me, when I found these podcasts, it was like my church. It was like my community. And from there, I just kind of, you know, would reach out and listen, etc. And until I started connecting with everyone. And now it's just like, you know, I'm slowly growing and becoming a part of these major communities. And it's been such a beautiful thing, man. The communities of just human beings, you know, with no bias.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have a similar struggle we've gone through.
Yeah, and what I have found is that atheists, the ones that I've known, are honestly so much more moral people than most Christians I've known.
Yeah.
Partially because they can be honest with themselves.
Yeah, they can look past theology and think about it critically, you know, use their reason and compassion to decide, is this something that's good or not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just been it's been the most amazing journey of my life. And at 40 years old, man, I mean, what's better than like waking up and having like everything you've known shifted, and now you have this whole other world opened up to you, where you can discover and learn and study and apply, etc. When you thought basically you were at the end of your learning in the first 35 years of your life.
Yeah. You know, you were able to find a lot of resources, not just podcasts, but books and things like that. But it's really cool because when I was starting the podcast, I just remember thinking, like, there's someone out there who's still Christian who, like, is going to go through this process, and they're going to find the podcast and it's going to encourage them. And, and it, like, I don't, like, in my head at the time, a couple years ago, you know, I didn't, you know, it was all just kind of theory, but I just knew it would happen, you know, because there's just so many of us, and everybody's a lot of people are deconverting all the time. So it's just really cool to think it did the thing I was hoping it would do for people, you know.
It really did, man.
Yeah.
It really did. And if you reached nobody else, brother, you reached me, and your podcast was humongous in my deconversion process. One, because just the way you come at it, like you're not this dude that's just sitting there like blaspheming it or hating on it or whatever. We all know why we've come out of it for our own reasons. But you're so respectful and so genuine in your questions, and it's something that anyone could listen to, whether they're a believer or not, and not just have this horrible gut-wrenching feeling, because it's literally people who are going through this thing that no one understands or knows about unless they're going through it, but just through genuine conversation, talking about the process and what it looks like, man. And that helped me so much.
That's really awesome. And it could be anything too. I mean, if it wasn't religion, it could be addiction, or it could be losing a family member. It could be losing a pet. I mean, the issue,
absolutely,
it's just people coming together, sharing difficult stories, but it just happens to be a similar story that we're all sharing. And there's something about coming together, and you were talking about community. This podcast has just created a little, it's a mini community, but it's a community. The people I've connected with. Yeah, and just being able to stay in touch with people and, shoot them an email or a tweet every once in a while. It's really cool. It for me, community was kind of a big thing, and so that it's actually helped a lot in that way. And I've met so many wonderful people, not just through the podcast, but through different atheist groups and things. And you're right. Like there's some awesome people out there, and they're really moral and they're really good, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, we're all in this together, man. Whether we're a Hindu or a Muslim or an atheist, it doesn't matter. It's just we're human. We're all human, man. So I understand the humanist narrative very well now.
Yeah, it's a human struggle.
I appreciate that, and I always hated feeling the way I felt. Like everyone I came in contact with, I couldn't just hang out with them and love them as a human being. I had to do that plus have an underlying agenda of converting them.
Oh man, I hated that. Yeah, I hated that feeling.
Horrible, man. It was just like, why can't these people be good enough how they are right now?
Yeah, why can't I just enjoy their company or talk to them about anything else and not have to worry about, well, I should be a good example. Well, I should tell them about Jesus or see if they'll come to my church.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It was just awful. I hated that. I really, really hated that. And even my dad, my folks are both like musicians. They've taught in colleges. They've been in orchestras. My dad used to host the Jerry Lewis Telethon on TV.
Wow.
3 years in a row in Wichita. I mean, they've just been all up in it, and that's been their ministry. And but he's always told me, Matthew, I've never felt like I needed to go out there pounding on doors, beating the gospel over people's heads. And I was the same way. I did. Because of my convictions, but I never felt good about it.
Well, now that you've come out of Christianity, and it's only been 7 or 8 months now, but have you learned something? Well, obviously you've read tons of books, but have you learned something or experienced something that you don't think you would have if you'd stayed Christian?
Oh yeah, many things. One is genuine unconditional love of my fellow human, of other people, regardless of where they're at. Another is a much deeper respect for all people's beliefs or walks of life, because just because I have mine doesn't mean that there's not something I can pick up from someone else, simply because they don't have the same religious convictions I do.
That's really cool.
I'm married, right? But I'm with my wife because I love my wife, not because I'm forced by God to be with my wife if I want to have sex, those kinds of things, man. It's just, there's a freedom I've never known, and there's a peace I've never known. And they say that you can't have peace without God, but I'm here to tell you that I have it more than I ever have. You could ask my wife, even when I came back, and again, my wife's a believer and we respect each other.
That's cool.
I'm not, and sometimes we have our conversations and debates, and that's okay.
those are two really beautiful things to me. Like learning to love people unconditionally without any kind of second agenda, even if you didn't want to have that agenda, you always had that Christian agenda. And then also just respecting people's beliefs, and no matter whether they're Muslim, atheist, Christian, Hindu, doesn't matter. It just being able to really take something good from each human being. I really appreciate that too.
It means a lot, you know? I mean, like, I work with, at my site where I work as a tech, 80% of the people there are Nepali. Oh, wow. And most people from Nepal are very devout Hindus. And I have discovered that the Hindu religion is very beautiful. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to appease 300 million gods a day, but, you know, but it's a beautiful religion, man. I mean, they're just some of the sweetest, most awesome people. You know what I mean? It's
that's really cool.
You know, if you want to be gay, dude. I'll love you to pieces. You respect where I'm at, I'll respect where you're at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No one's going to hate you for that. That's what you like. That's what you love. Be gay. You know, cool. You're not going to hell for that. There's no original sin, man.
Right. Who cares? Live your life. Be happy. Yeah.
I'm just like, man, you know, okay, so to reiterate, I'm just like, fucking live your life, man. Live your life. Be happy. Do you. This is all you get. This is all you get now for the most part of our understanding. So if this is all we get, live it to the max and love everyone, man. And there's a guy out there right now. Have you heard of Dave Warnock?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I had him on the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
I had him on a few episodes ago. Yeah. He's been everywhere. Yeah. He's
Luke's
cool.
had him on. He was just on the Atheist Experience this week with Matt Dillahunty.
Yep.
Dude, his thing is carpe the fucking diem. That's what I'm talking about. Carpe the fucking diem, dude.
It puts so much in perspective when you realize, you know, how short life can be, and just how precious, like he says, I think Dave says, we don't remember days, we remember moments. And so his whole thing is trying to capture the moments. And
every moment. And man,
yeah, that's really awesome.
His, you know, he's in Italy, he's here, he's there. That dude is living his best life right now, and I got nothing but respect for him.
Absolutely.
And man, if anybody could change it, I would love to change it for him. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, and the fact that he's able to do that with a clear, unindoctrinated mind, you know,
that's a
just
gift.
living. That is a gift, because you know the old saying, "There's no atheists in foxholes." I beg to differ.
Yeah.
You know. I beg to differ,
and he really
I guarantee
is one. You know,
he really, really is, man. And I've got nothing but respect and appreciation for people like him that can face death in the eye and be like, you know what?
This is part of the human experience. It's something we're all going to have to face at some point.
That's exactly right, man.
And it can be hard, but I think the way he's going about it is the way I would hope I would go about it someday. You know,
absolutely, absolutely. And I pray that I'm as graceful. Sorry, not pray, but you know what I mean.
That was kind of an awesome slip,
yeah. You know,
it's like a Christian Freudian slip, but yeah, sort of, yeah.
Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
It's like the saying, "Thank God I'm an atheist." You know what I mean?
yeah. That's awesome. So, so when you look back at your experience and having been such a different person in some ways than you are today, and you probably know this question's coming because I ask it every time, but I like it. So,
sure.
Yeah, sure. So you were a totally different person in some ways. Now you've got tattoos that say religion kills, and it has the atheist symbol. Like that person, if you stood him next to the guy that you were, 10 years ago or whatever, totally different people in some ways. But of course there's something good about us that's there from the start. Yeah. What's something that you look back on in your life that you say is something positive about yourself that's carried through? It was true of you when you were a Christian. It's still true today.
I've always been empathetic to the underdog. I've always had a deep concern for people's mental states because of my own struggles. And going through the human experience, I think that we all go through many, many things that can benefit or help other people.
Yeah.
Similarly, like you went through your experience and you're like, man, there's nobody really talking about this, or how do we all get through this together? I'm going to make a podcast. And you made a podcast, man. And you're like, your podcast was super instrumental with me, or other people just all through the ages. I'm just one of millions of voices in this community, but I want to be that voice that lets that other person know that, hey, man, I may have gone through a similar experience as you, but there is hope and there is life on the other side of this. And I want to assure you it can be beautiful.
Yeah.
So what I have taken from that side is, I've kept the compassion, I've kept the humanism, I've kept the love of people, and just got rid of all the crap that was just ugly, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. You left the bad and kept the good.
Yeah.
So, for the person who was like you were 8 months ago, who's just coming out of this and is feeling that completely like lost and alone, and what kind of encouragement or what piece of guidance would you give that person?
I would tell them, first of all, you are not in any way, shape, or form alone. We, etc., have been where you are, and all you need to do is keep searching. Get every book you can, listen to every podcast you can, connect with people like that host these kind of podcasts. Connect with everyone you can in this community. Get on your Facebook, subscribe to every atheistic humanist thing that you can. Just get plugged in. Just like you would have been told to plug into a church, plug into this. Again, with this, as with any other thing, there are your extremists and there are your moderates. And you have to make your own decision to keep the meat and spit out the bones. But just get plugged in and you will find your way, and you will absolutely begin to truly love your life.
So, is there anything that we haven't talked about, or any resources that you wanted to mention for people, or anything that about your story that you wanted to bring up that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
If there's a few books I could recommend. The first one, it's very heavy. It'll take a little while to get through, but anything you read by this author, it will blow your mind as far as getting you on the right path. But the one I would recommend first and foremost is John Loftus, Why I Became an Atheist. That book is extremely powerful. This man is well researched, he's well read, and he quotes a lot of people through the ages. And I mean, he literally covers everything from deconversion to his story to hell to, just all of it. Biblical scholars. And then I would definitely recommend The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins to start familiarizing yourself with evolution, especially if you were brought up a creationist.
Yeah, that's a great one. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably be my email. It's battleborn1978@gmail.com. And that's BATTLEBORN1978@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, Matt, it has been a pleasure to meet you, and it's been great hearing your story and some of the parallels, between our experiences in faith, but also like the tattoo that my son got and that you got. Like, there's all these different things that kind of, some commonality there, and awesome. I really associate with like the mental health piece too, because I've tried to be somewhat open about my struggles with depression and things like that, and I love that. For you, something that you focus on is this, respect for the struggle people have.
Yes.
I forget how you put it. It's like concern for people's mental states. That's how you said it. And that's just super important.
The one thing that I didn't disclose in there is that I have struggled with manic depression my whole life. I've had to be medicated for it for the last 20 plus years. And then just in 2017, I was officially diagnosed by bipolar. But it's a very light end of bipolar, because it was what I was called before was manic depressive. And now apparently today they call that bipolar disorder.
Oh, interesting. So you've probably been bipolar for 20 years or so.
Apparently.
Oh, wow.
But the one thing I do want to add is that since I have deconverted, I have not had a single episode.
Wow.
The pressure and the theological implications, etc., have lifted completely. So I do believe that a lot of what I have dealt with mentally was religious trauma induced.
Man, that's really cool, and I can see why, because stress never makes mental health better.
Never.
I can't think of any instance with stress ever makes, mental health better unless you're being chased by a lion and then you get away. But like life stresses that we experience in everyday life, it's never good. So that's really
Absolutely.
cool. But yeah, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for staying up late on your end, because I know it's a lot later there, and
Absolutely.
so I appreciate you, meeting at this time to do it. And
my pleasure, and thank you so much again, Steve. It's an honor, man. I can't tell you how much your podcast has meant to me, and it's a real honor to be on here with you and to be a part of the family.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Be sure to join us next time by subscribing to the podcast.